Good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're watching the video. Welcome back to Bandit Network TV. Thank you for joining me in this podcast. So, in this podcast, we are going to be discussing the mysterious disappearance of Dennis Lloyd Martin. If you do not know who Dennis Martin is, back in the 1969, this 6-year-old boy disappeared in the Smoky Mountains named Dennis Lloyd Martin. If you do not know about Dennis Lloyd Martin, please do your own research. Research this topic for yourself. I have talked about this before on my channel. I've made a previous podcast. If you go back and listen to that, it will get you more caught up with the basics of the disappearance of Dennis Lloyd Martin. To this day, it is unknown what exactly happened to Dennis Lloyd Martin. You may also notice that Summer Wells is in the title of this video too, and that is because I want to bring in the theory of the Tennessee wild man or feral people of the Smoky Mountains, depending on what you may call them. We're going to be diving into conspiracy theories, people. Just a disclaimer, anything that I'm talking about on this network is simply my opinion and my viewpoint. It does fall under the copyright disclaimer, Section 107 of Copyright Act 1976. You already know what that means. The following information is coming to you from the Smokies.com. Feral humans in the Smoky Mountains. What happened to Dennis Martin? I do invite you to go over to my community tab post, where I posted a picture of Dennis Martin, one of the only pictures out there of 6-year-old Dennis. A lot of you did not know who this person was. Some of you thought that it was actually me as a child. No, that picture is of Dennis Martin. Dennis Martin was 6 years old in June of 1969. His disappearance in the Smoky Mountains has sparked wild theories decades later. Dennis Martin was 6 years old in June of 1969. It was Father's Day weekend, and they hiked near the Tennessee-North Carolina border, a Martin family tradition. William Martin, Dennis Martin's father, and Clyde, his grandfather, and the two boys started at the Cades Cove, hiked to Russell Field, where they camped overnight. This was a family tradition. Every Father's Day weekend, Dennis and his family would go to the Smoky Mountains to hike. So this was a regular routine for them every year. It was an annual event. Afterwards, they made their way to Spence Field, where they met another family with young boys, also named Martin. It was late in the afternoon, and the boys were enjoying each other's company. He was wearing a bright red shirt, referring to Dennis Martin, when he and his brother, along with two boys they just met, planned a prank on the relaxing adults in the Spencefield area, balled along the Appalachian Trail. So the story goes that Dennis Martin, along with his two, I believe they were cousins, and these other kids, were planning to hide behind the bushes and jump out to surprise the adults, right? The boys weren't especially sneaky with the prank. The goal was to hide behind the adults and pop out to surprise them. However, the adults knew what the boys were up to, so they clearly saw what they were doing. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because, according to Dennis Martin's father, he saw him go behind the bush along with these two other children. The two other boys told Dennis, because he had the bright red shirt and it was going to give them away, they didn't want to be given away. They told Dennis to go hide further in the foliage or in this vegetation behind the bushes, these bushes that they were hiding behind. They didn't want Dennis to give them away. So Dennis did that. The adults watched as the three boys went one way to sneak back through the bush. They watched 6-year-old Dennis in the bright red shirt sneak off in the other direction, and for all intents and purposes off the face of the earth. This was the last time that anybody's seen Dennis Martin alive, or seen Dennis Martin, period. This is a very disturbing case. We are talking about a 6-year-old that disappeared within a matter of minutes. And it's not like the case of Summer Wells where, they were planting cactuses and they went back inside and Candace came back and Summer was gone. We're talking about they disappeared, or Dennis Martin disappeared in plain sight just minutes after being seen. One of the questions that people have asked: how exactly did Dennis Martin disappear without a trace of what happened to him? There's been no bones. There was nothing left behind. No clothing. No signs of a wild animal attack. Nothing. He just disappeared. No screams. Nothing. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to Bandit Network TV. And let's hop into this mysterious disappearance of Dennis Lloyd Martin, also making comparisons to Summer Wells. Continuing to read from the Smokies.com, the disappearance of Dennis Martin. The three boys performed their prank, all in good fun. When Dennis did not pop up from the other angle, William, his father, got up to look for him. He hadn't been out of sight for more than 5 minutes, according to William. But his search quickly turned frantic after discovering that Dennis just vanished out of thin air. The father ran back up to the hill towards Russell Field, hoping the boy had gotten turned around and gone in the wrong direction. The others combed through the area. Clyde eventually hiked out to the park rangers station, arriving after 9 p.m. By then, a massive storm had arrived, drenching the mountains in a massive rainfall and dropping overnight temperatures into the 50s. The following day, the search was hampered by 2.5 inches of rain and dense fog. As word spread of the missing boy, a massive response grew. It's been said that a large group of people, some of which the area has ever seen, after Dennis's disappearance, came out to search for this boy, which only complicated the search for Dennis Martin. The search party grew to a counterproductive size. It goes on to say that over the next few weeks, the search grew to an unwieldy and counterproductive size. Boy Scouts, National Guard members, along with multiple search squads, and even a group of 71 Green Berets, which we're going to talk more about them later on in this podcast. Remember the 71 Green Berets, who had been on maneuvers in the western North Carolina, came and searched for the 6-year-old boy. Helicopters arrived as well. With so many searches and volunteers tramping over the wet and muddy ground, any clue or sight that lingered after the massive rain was quickly lost. Denny turned 7, referring to Dennis Martin, 7 that week as searchers exhausted themselves to no avail. So his birthday was shortly after he disappeared. There were boy-sized footprints of someone wearing an Oxford loafer shoe like Dennis Martin had on during his disappearance, and the other one barefoot. However, according to the family members, the prints were too big to belong to Dennis Martin, and the searchers were skeptical as the area had been searched by Boy Scouts previously who had left the prints. So in other words, they were not able to determine whether the prints were actually Dennis Martin's because so many people were searching the area. And my guess, back there in the 1950s, an Oxford-style loafer was worn by Boy Scouts. So it was ruled out being Dennis Martin's. A single sock and shoe were also found, but it is unclear if the shoe was the right type of size or if it is the correct foot to correspond with the footprints. So there was a single sock and shoe that was found, but they don't believe that it's connected to Dennis Martin's. It's unclear. Those were essentially the only clues. So again, we have a footprint that the family believes that does not belong to Dennis Martin. And we also have a shoe with a sock. However, the shoe and sock did not correspond with the footprints. Dennis was 6 when he disappeared and was never seen again. So an odd testimony from the Key family, a family from Carthage, Tennessee, was in the mountains that day looking for wildlife in the Cades Cove, several miles where Dennis Martin went missing. They left without knowing about the search or the missing boy. Weeks later, when the father, Harold Key, learned about the search, he called officials and reported hearing a scream coming from the area. So there was a family several miles away in the Smoky Mountains that was searching for wildlife the same day as Dennis Martin turned up missing. Keep in mind, several miles away. That is important. They heard a scream coming from the area. They went on to say that they saw a figure running through the woods. News reports at the time indicated that the Key's son thought the figure was a bear or appeared to be a wild animal that stood on 2 legs. Later, they determined that it was a disheveled man hiding in the bushes. a disheveled man hiding in the bushes. That's what they later determined. Quote, he was definitely avoiding us. Key was quoted at the time. So this family heard a scream. They saw something run through the bushes, and they also reported seeing someone trying to hide and deter attention away from themselves on the same hiking trail. Officials discounted the connection because the distance and the rough timeline Key provided. It was nearly impossible to think that anyone could have snatched the boy and carried him away to that spot. Anyone that is familiar with the Smoky Mountains knows, anyone that's ever been to that area, let alone hiked, would know, kind of similar to Summer Wells, if you are going to take anybody off that trail, it's going to be hard. There's terrain, you have to be booking it. You have to dodge a bunch of trees. You have to get to a parking lot ASAP, as soon as possible. And there was no parking lot within the proximity of Spence Field where Dennis Martin disappeared. So what happened to Dennis Martin? That brings me into my theory. And if you have not already taken my community tab post, I do invite you to take the poll. We are playing on the verge of conspiracies. Let me ask, for the ones of you that do think Don and Candace Wells are innocent, do you think that Summer Wells was taken by Tennessee wild men or feral people in the Smoky Mountains? Some of you probably have never heard of the feral people or the Tennessee wild man. For the ones of you that are watching in Tennessee, Rogersville to be exact, you may have heard one of these theories brought up. Yes, no, or you just don't know what I'm talking about. Again, please go over to my community tab and take the poll. Let your voice be heard. So the feral people that allegedly still live within the Smoky Mountains once was an actual thing. This is not something that I'm making up. You can do your research on this topic and come to your own conclusions. Back in the 1920s and 1930s, there was indeed feral men living within the Smoky Mountains. Uncivilized people living off the land, scavengers. They hunted anything they can get, berries. They picked up roadkill and they, ate it. They were described as being thin with big feet, and some even had mysterious tattoos on their hand. I would like to provide an intermission for the ones of you that are familiar with or want to learn more about this topic. Please go over to a YouTube channel that goes by the name of South Force 10. South Force 10 talks more about this on his channel, the legends and myths of the Smoky Mountains and Tennessee wild man. He was one of the first YouTubers that I came across while researching this topic weeks ago. And he tells more about it, and he tells a lot better than what I can, but this is just to give you guys a better basic viewpoint of these wild men that live in the Great Smoky Mountains of Tennessee. They are described as being cannibalistic. And this would not be the first time that some people have mysteriously disappeared without a trace in the Great Smoky Mountains. Unfortunately, Dennis Martin is one of the main statistics. According to the Smoky Mountains source.com, they do address the rumors of the feral humans living in the Smoky Mountains. In recent years, the Appalachian Mountains, and more specifically the Smoky Mountains, have been a popular location for Americans to wonder if feral humans are living in the backwoods. The theory of feral humans living in the Smokies come from certain unidentified disappearances. Unexplained and unidentified disappearances. While these disappearances are real, the evidence surrounding them lead to natural answers for these missing people. So again, this is coming from the SmokyMountains.com. You have to form your own conclusions. Keep in mind that they bring in billions of dollars each year from tourism. So the last thing that they would want would be negative publicity and creepy conspiracy theories contaminating their income. So of course they're going to be dismissing these theories, but let's carry on. Who are the feral people? Feral people also could be called wild or humans who have lived without American society for hundreds of years. These people would now resemble more beast than man, having spent all of their time in the deep forest of the United States. An appropriate question to ask would be, where did these feral people come from? Interestingly, there are plenty of theories as to where these beasts originally come from. Some people think they are closely related to the Bigfoot Sasquatch creatures. Others believe that they could be left over from the Cherokee who hid during the Trail of Tears, and even more suspect, they are descendants of those who fled into the mountains where the national parks were created. So, from this article thus far, the feral people, some believe, originate from Bigfoot/Sasquatch creatures, and that alone is its own conspiracy theory. Others believe that they could have been left over from Cherokees and Native Americans that hid during the Trail of Tears, if I can get my wording right, that runs through the Great Smoky Mountains during the time. And then others suspect that they are descendants of those who fled into the Smoky Mountains without the national park, when the national park was created. So why do the feral people attack other human beings? If you subscribe to the feral people theory, you usually also subscribe to the thought that there are feral people and they are cannibalistic. So their motive for kidnapping innocent hikers, in particular young children, small young children, and adventurers, would be eventually to consume them, ultimately. Of course, we don't have any significant proof that any of these disappearances led to cannibalistic outcomes. Where did the feral people theory originate? Who came up with these crazy ideas? Over the years, the feral human theory gained steam consistently. As more people disappeared in the national parks around the country, some people were not satisfied with the answer park officials gave them or simply refused to believe the circumstances that these officials claimed surrounded the incident. If there was one single case that has ramped up the belief of a popular feral humans in the Great Smoky Mountain, it would be the disappearance of Dennis Martin. Jim Terry, are you watching? Hopefully you're not too creeped out. For those unaware, Dennis Martin was a 6-year-old boy who disappeared in the Smoky Mountains near Spence Field of the area of the national park. It happened in the span of fewer than 5 minutes, during which his father took his eyes off his son. So again, Dennis Martin, it's said that he was playing a prank on the adults with the other children. His father seen Dennis go behind the bush into the vegetation, and within a matter of minutes, these kids, which they also seen go behind the bush, popped out. But Dennis didn't pop out. So can you just visualize, for the ones of you that have kids, or if you have little cousins, small children, they like to be playful. I was like that whenever I was a child. I like to play pranks, pop out, scare my parents. Imagine you seeing your kids clearly about to play a prank on you, clearly about to scare you. You want to play along with it. You got me, ha ha. Joke's over. You see all of your kids go behind the bush, but one of them did not pop out. So your thought would be, well, maybe they are taking this a little bit too further and we're just going to play along with it. They just want to take extra time to scare us. And that's originally what Dennis's father, William, thought. He thought that Dennis was just going to continue playing along the game. But when the other children popped out and they made their way back to the campsite, and Dennis was still missing after 5 minutes, he knew something was seriously wrong. That's when William ran down the hill for several miles until he was just out of range, and he thought that how far could Dennis have gotten within a matter of minutes? And keep in mind, we're not talking about this hiking trail is anywhere near a parking lot with a car. It's in the middle of the woods. And we're talking about a 6-year-old child. Let's carry on what the Smoky Mountain source has to say about these feral people. The search for Dennis that followed ballooned into the biggest search in the history of the Great Smoky Mountains, which might have ultimately combined with the weather to hinder location of the young boy. By the time the search was over, Dennis's family believed that he had been kidnapped. The FBI thought that he had died in the woods, and the public began running with theories from all over the spectrum. The single biggest piece of evidence, and evidence is in quote unquote evidence, those in favor of the feral human theory points to Dennis's case and a witness who described seeing a man who looked more like a beast rumbling through the woods. I have personally read all of the relevant reports on this case. Whoever wrote this article is saying, and this evidence can easily be refuted and was so in the original report. The location where this supposed feral human was seen happened to be far from the area where Dennis had disappeared, that no human or creature could have covered such a great distance in the timeline the witness provided. Well, whoever wrote this article and whoever is claiming and dismissing the theory of the feral humans, who's to say that there's not more than one feral human or Tennessee wild man out there lurking in the Smoky Mountains hiking trail? Now, keep in mind, we're talking about the 1950s. These things were prominent in the 20s and 30s, and allegedly, remember how we were talking about the Green Berets, how they came in soon after Dennis Martin's disappearance? According to this one YouTuber who talked about his great-grandfather, South Force 10, again, go check out his channel. He's saying that in the 1940s and early 50s, these things were hunted and eradicated from the park because the Smoky Mountains National Park did not want them to interfere with, their income and the business flow for tourists. I'm pretty sure that a lot of tourists would not want to be touring the Smoky Mountains Trail with these things running around, cannibalistic humanoid creatures waiting to pop out and bite your head off. That's not a good look for a hiking trail, let alone if you bring children there. So what would be the ultimate solution? Kill them all, eradicate them, get rid of them. But of course, they would not let the public know about this, people. They're not going to come out and say that we kill hundreds of feral humans. Who would do that? It's not a smart business decision. But this is what allegedly went on. Did a feral human or a Tennessee wild man snatch Dennis Martin off that trail in June of 1969? That's for you to decide. Are feral humans living in the Smokies to this day? Well, anything's possible, I guess, but no. No evidence proves or even suggests that feral humans are living in the Smokies or anywhere in the Appalachian Mountains, including Kentucky, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Tennessee, and North Carolina. The Smoky Mountains are so dangerous for a host of reasons, and I think that it would be proper to have this legend under Occam's radar or razor until we find definite evidence that says otherwise. The simplest answer to any of these disappearances is that they are simply tragedies without proof of foul play. Well, how could you rule out foul play when there's no evidence that points to there being foul play or there not being any foul play? So you have to remain neutral, in my opinion. Who's to say that there are not Tennessee wild men still lingering in the dark coves and the forbidden caverns? Some of you are going to know what I'm talking about. The forbidden caverns, the caves that have been known, and it's been proven people used to live inside these caverns. This is where they sought shelter and made their homes at. Let me show you guys what I mean. This is a series of cave systems under the Great Smoky Mountains, where it's thought that these people used to live, and where allegedly the Tennessee wild men live as well. Hello, Frank. Hello, Elaine. To back up that notion, in the entire nearly 100 years of records kept in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, only a handful of people have ever been found. Many people have disappeared and then later have died of natural causes. Just because we don't find the body does not mean that they were taken by feral humans. So to be fair, I do get what they're saying. You know, I'm sure that there are people, some less intelligent humans, that decide to take the path, the unbeaten path, go off the hiking trails, and then they get met with their demise and their fate, either by a bear, a panther, some other wild creature out there besides a feral human. You know, there's a rattlesnake. There's a lot of other things that you should be afraid of in the Great Smoky Mountains opposed to these feral humans. Now, that being said, most of the times when a body is found in the Great Smoky Mountains, it is ruled out to be, you know, of natural causes, or they succumbed to the elements, whether a wild animal caught them or they froze to death, hypothermia, suffocated, had a heat stroke, whatever, and just couldn't get back to civilization. The body would be found, and it does not matter if an animal ripped them to shreds. There would be something left behind. Animals do not eat clothing that would be left behind. Bones, fragments. Sometimes it takes years and years and years for the remains to be found at the Great Smoky Mountains. However, in the case of Dennis Martin, this was not discovered. The only thing that was found was a sock and a shoe and footprints, but they can't even determine certainly if those were Dennis Martin's because of all the people that were in the area. And furthermore, from the article I just read to you, the footprints along with the shoe that was found don't match up. So who's to say if it was actually Dennis's? And then the family even says it's the wrong size. It's too big to be Dennis Martin's shoe. But then again, I don't know. Who's to say that he wasn't taken off by a wild animal? Let's talk about Summer Wells. How does this play into the factor of Summer Wells? If you do not believe that Dawn and Candace are responsible for Summer Wells' disappearance, oh yeah, here's a weird coincidence, guys. So Dennis Martin, it's worthy of mentioning that Dennis Martin disappeared in June 15th, 1969. Summer Wells disappeared on June 15th, 2021. Both children disappeared on the 15th of June. Both, to this day, have not been found. There has not been any trace of them or what could have happened to them, besides conspiracy theories against the parents. That being said, I know that some people do not believe that Dawn and Candace had anything to do with Summer's disappearance. They don't think that she was kidnapped off the road either. So I ask you, what do you think happened to Summer Wells? What do you think happened to Summer Wells if you refuse to believe her parents had anything to do with her disappearance, nor was she kidnapped off the road? What would that leave? Well, she could have been taken off by a wild animal. Maybe a panther got her. Going back to the theory, if a wild animal did get Summer Wells, you would find remnants, clothing, bones at this point. Or maybe not. Because the Appalachian Mountains and the vegetation within the Appalachians have a mysterious way of hiding bodies. So if you want to go to the theory of her being taken off by a wild animal, then whatever was left of her could be hidden in the foliage. Rogersville, Tennessee is in northeastern Tennessee, close to the Appalachian Trail. Is it quite possible that the Tennessee wild man, or one of these Tennessee wild man, feral humans, whatever you want to refer to them as, came up on that hill on June 15th and mysteriously snatched Summer Wells as she walked out her family's back door? A few months ago, I brought you commentary where the brothers told Ronnie Lawson, when interviewed initially, they last seen Summer walk out the back door to play with her toys, or whatever they seen her walk out the back door. That came directly from Ronnie Lawson. So if we're led to believe that she walked out the back door, where would she go? To her swing? It's been said that Summer likes to go down the dog trail, into the woods off that embankment. And I'm just theorizing. It may sound ridiculous and ludicrous with what I'm about to say, but hell, this case is full with conspiracies and theories. It's not out of the ordinary. What if Summer Wells was snatched up by one of these feral humans or Tennessee wild man, and she met the same fate as Dennis Lloyd Martin did back in 1969? If you have not already taken my community tab post, I do encourage you to. Do you think that Summer Wells was taken by a Tennessee wild man or a feral human living in the Smoky Mountains? lurking, creeping, watching for the perfect opportunity to sneak up on that hill and snatch a 5-year-old girl away. On the contrary, do you think that what I'm talking about is completely ludicrous, ridiculous, and Dawn and Candace know exactly what happened to their daughter and just doesn't want to tell? You know, they're guilty to the public's eyes. They know exactly what happened to Summer Wells. There's no Tennessee wild man. There's no conspiracy theories. It just gets chalked up to a case of she was unwanted. She was unwanted by Dawn and Candace, so they got rid of her. Was Summer Wells gotten rid of because there was a police CPS investigation launched on the 14th of June, 2021? And for whatever reason, Summer Wells turned up missing the following day. All parties are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Just like what I was talking about with the Idaho 4 case with Brian Koberger, Dawn and Candace have yet to be charged with anything. So they're innocent, but in the public eye, they are guilty. And in my personal opinion, I don't think that Summer Wells was taken by a Tennessee wild man. I don't think that she was snatched off the hill by some feral human. I don't think that she was snatched up playing on her swing by some hawk. Someone said that last year. They were like, well, what if she was taken away by a hawk? She was taken away by a hawk, you know. Well, I doubt a hawk could pick up a 5-year-old child. I mean, Summer was very thin, but that's still a lot of weight for a hawk to come and snatch her up so easily. And even if a hawk did come and pick her up, she would have been found. My guess is that the hawk wouldn't have got that far with her before he just dropped her, you know? So I definitely don't think that happened. The Tennessee wild man, one of these feral humans, did they sneak inside the basement of 110 Ben Hill Road and snatched Summer up? Did they even have the intelligence of doing that? I don't think so, people. I think we all know what happened to Summer Wells, or at least have an idea of who was responsible for her disappearance that day. But again, all parties are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. But I just wanted to bring you this comparison, this older case of Dennis Lloyd Martin. Some of you thought that the picture of Dennis Martin looked familiar, but you couldn't put your finger exactly of who it was. Let me show you the picture. Thank you for joining. If you have tuned in, thank you for listening. If you are watching on the replay, happy Sunday to the viewing audience. Have a good start to your week. The disappearance of Dennis Martin. Dennis Lloyd Martin was an American child who disappeared on June 15, 1969, in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park in Tennessee at the age of 6. The search efforts was the most extensive in the park's history, involving approximately 1,400 searchers in a 56 square mile area. Dennis Martin was born on June 20th, 1962, and the date of him disappearing was June 15th. Some reports, they say June 14th, but from my understanding, he disappeared on the 15th of June, 1969. And again, that's so weird because Summer Wells disappeared on the 15th of June, so... If we are to look at the location where Dennis Martin disappeared, it was in Spence Field. Let's see if I can get the map. The elevation of Spence Field tops out to be 5,000 feet above sea level and approximately eight miles wide. So it's a vast area, to say the least. And this is what it looks like off the top of the mountain where Spence Field is located. To the people that are familiar with the Dennis Martin case that want to argue, well, it's pretty shut and closed. He was kidnapped and he was taken to a parking lot. You know, someone took him to a parking lot. Do you see any parking lot within this area? You are literally on, I'm sorry guys, you are literally on top of a mountain. And you see how high these bushes are. So imagine a 5-year-old, 6-year-old. He was 6 years old. Still, he's pretty short. In a bright red shirt, going behind one of these bushes, and no more than 4 minutes later, he just disappeared without a trace. Who else could have been up on this field besides, one, a wild animal, or two, one of these feral people, aka the Tennessee Wild Man or Tennessee Wild Men. I keep on saying Tennessee Wild Man, but it's actually men, plural, because there's more than one. Now, whenever you ask people, they're like, oh yeah, those things were eradicated back in the 40s and in the 30s. But who's to say that there's still not some lingering within this vast terrain, hiding in the caverns beneath the Smoky Mountains? I was trying to find a better map of Spence Field. Let's see if we can get some other pictures. Sorry about the car in the background. So here's another picture of Spence Field, and you can see that there's a lot of trees and vegetation, high grass. You're still up on this hill. Let's see if I can find a better map of where we're talking about. Okay, so I just went to Google Maps and typed in Spence Field. I don't know why I didn't do that before. So here is Spence Field right here. And as you can see, there is absolutely no parking lot anywhere in sight. Here is the Boat Mountain Trail. It is close to the Tennessee-North Carolina border, just on the verge of Tennessee, going into North Carolina. But still, for the people that it's actually in North Carolina. Anyways, I think that they were on the Tennessee side, but this is how big Spence Field is. There is absolutely no parking lots anywhere close to where Dennis Martin disappeared. And the closest one I would assume would be right here, Spence Field Trail Shelter. It says right here, children's map. Let's go back to the actual map. So let's zoom out. Continue to zoom out. Continue to zoom out. Are you guys getting a better understanding of the terrain and the vast terrain? We're talking about the Smoky Mountains. And if we change the area to this, there's no roads. Near this Spence Field. It's all trees. It's all terrain, vegetation, thick vegetation. I haven't been to this part of the Smoky Mountains, but I can even tell you, anyone that's been in Pigeon Forge, Caryville, Tennessee, Sevierville, Rogersville, Churchill, this is a hiking trail right here. There is no roads, no major roads for anybody to have taken this kid off to a car and driven him away. If you go up north, you see nothing but trees and more trees, and you guessed it, trees. You go down south, you see trails, you see the shelter, but you don't see any major roads. The only road that is close, see traffic right here. Let's continue to zoom out. So yeah, right up here's a road. Or is this another walking trail? Yep, it's a walking trail. No, there's a road. That's a road. But you guys get the understanding, right? The nearest road we're talking about is this one right here. And that is a long way from, especially if we're talking about Spence Field, someone carrying Dennis Martin this far up to this road, up to Cades Cove Campground in Crib Gab Trailhead. That's a long, long way to be carrying somebody by foot. And if we go to Spence Field itself, here's a terrain of Spence Field. This is why they say do not go off the trail, because you don't know what is lurking. You don't know what is out there. There could be lions and well, not lions. I'm just being exaggerating. I'm being funny. Like the Wizard of Oz, lions and tigers and bears. Oh my. You could possibly get some bears, some pumas, some wildcats, rattlesnakes. But who's to say that there's not something or someone, some bodies hiding within this terrain? I mean, just a view, it looks like it was taken in December of 2017. So this is what it looks like in the winter time. And it's still pretty thick with all of the trees in hibernation, losing their leaves. So can you imagine during the summertime, June 14th, 15th, when Dennis disappeared, all of these trees still had their foliage and their leaves. That's thick. So thick that you can't spit. very strange. It's beautiful, very scenic, but very strange. What happened to Dennis Lloyd Martin? Do you believe that Dennis Lloyd Martin was taken off by the Tennessee Wildman, or do you think that he was kidnapped somehow, some way from Spencefield? Or do you believe that a wild animal got Dennis Lloyd Martin and his body was never recovered? If Dennis is still alive, he would be currently 54 years old. Let me pull up this picture right here. He would probably be older than 54 years old, because I don't know when this advanced imagery was taken. So 1969 to 79, 10, 89, 20, 99, 30, 2009, 40, 2019, 50. Yeah, so 54 years old. He's missing from Blount, Tennessee. The picture on the right is a composite image of what Dennis may look like at 51 years old. He was last seen on June 14th, 1969 at Spencefield in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. Anybody having information should contact the Great Smoky Mountain National Park in Tennessee at 1-865-436-1230 or the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800-THE-LOST or 1-800-843-5678. 1-800-843-5678, 5678. So anybody with information regarding Summer Wells should contact the Tennessee Bureau of Investigations at 1-800-TBI-FIND. Summer Wells was missing, or she's been missing since June 15th, 2021 from Rogersville, Tennessee, in the Beach Creek community. She went missing allegedly from her residential home off 110 Ben Hill Road. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for tuning in. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this podcast. Share your thoughts and opinions on the disappearance of Dennis Martin and the disappearance of Summer Moon Utah Wells. Do you think that these cases share similarities? Do you believe in the Tennessee Wildman, feral people of the Smoky Mountains? Once again, if you want to hear more about these creatures, go over to South Force 10 his YouTube channel because he can explain it better than what I can. Like, share, and subscribe. If you want to get in touch with me, my email is at seraphicpathways.yahoo.com. There on the screen. That would also be the email that you can reach out to me if you want a reading.